But 10 community schools would get done 50 times more than 10 charter schools. So why isn't Mr. Pettigrew pushing them?
You'd have to ask.
Well, I did ask him, but you
I'd be way out of line speaking anything other than what he testified about, what the bill's about.
I urge you to ask him.
Yeah,
those are the questions we need to answer.
Sure, and I'm sure he would respond. My point is,
he hasn't responded to me.
I understand your frustration. I don't like when people don't ask my questions either. But my point is, this is a modest bill with a recognized mechanism, charter schools, that's being used successfully. He simply wants to have access to that.
Let me directly ask you, what's in your toolbox? What does your toolbox look like?
Okay, we're going to stick with one
Okay,
question.
so I meant to reframe it to you so you could answer me. What does your toolbox look like? Why are you promoting charters if you can't show me your toolbox with the cost-benefit analysis and the cited references of everything in your toolbox so that we can choose what works?
I'm happy to answer, but if you feel like other people should be asking questions, it's your turn.
No, actually, Kate, I'm going to hold that one and just open it up. I see other questions. And then maybe at the end of the forum, if Beth has time, you two can have a discussion, if she has time. Thanks. Okay, Kristen has an answer for the toolbox. So.
This isn't an answer for Pettigrew, but it is an answer for the toolbox, which is that our state has, the OSDI has a group, sorry, I'm blanking on the name, with a plan to close the achievement gap. And it has actually some strategies laid out. So it's focus on STEM, it's expanding successful programs in middle school and high school with African American students, emphasis. There we go. Achievement Gap Oversight and Accountability Committee. It's the Achievement Gap Oversight and Accountability Committee.
They meet every year.
And they have a plan. So they have just this list of really easy to understand strategies and some of the things that actually are being done now in some of our Seattle schools. But they just don't get the high profile attention.
And it's like a 15-page report they issue it every year. It's bipartisan. It's got House Senate members.
Does it have preschool and preparing kids for kindergarten on it?
It's got...
And the funding that goes with that?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it?
It's... Why don't you find me afterwards and I'll give you the site. If you bing it, you'll find it. It's got its reports. In fact, that chart I put up, my first chart, is from that committee.
Thank you. I think I saw Ms. Crooks' hand up.
Yeah, most of the things you've talked about as far as comparing charter schools and public schools or the pros and cons has been about administration and finance. And it seems, is that what you're for, is the type of administration and the type of finance, the decision-making that happens in a charter school? Because it seems to me that all the curriculum, all the programs that happen in charter schools are all very different. And so just voting for charter schools or just supporting charter schools doesn't necessarily, I don't really know what that, what are you thinking of when you're saying charter schools?
That's a really good question, because I'm just going to go over here because the court is. That's a really good question because we're trapped in this theoretical debate about charter schools, and you're right. You go to 10 charter schools, you'll find 10 very different environments. But here's what the commonality is: choice. Parents choose the school, teachers choose to be at the school, principal chooses to be there. Everybody who's there wants to be there. Flexibility. In exchange for greater accountability, like the school closure week that Kristen walked us through, the school is given significant autonomy and flexibility over how they choose to teach. The iconic founder of the American Federation of Teachers, Albert Shanker, he's actually considered the person who thought up the idea of a charter school. And he envisioned them as teacher-led laboratories of reform. In other words, it's a place where the people in the building decide what works for those kids. It's site-based. And the third piece that you have, that is the, which I just already touched on, the third piece is accountability. And that is, there's basically an agreement, the charter, and it's what the school will accomplish, typically is 3 to 5 years. If it isn't meeting its goal, if it's not making progress, then this school has to change what it's doing. They have to revamp. They have to take a second look. The most severe thing that could happen is that it could be closed. Typically what happens is they rework and see what happens. I've seen different statistics on closures. I've seen it's about 16%, but it probably depends on how you're measuring it.
So just to let you know, that was the original idea. It was this guy named Ray Budd and then Albert Shanker, who was one of the presidents of the American Federation of Teachers, bought onto it because it was supposed to be 1 or 2 classrooms in a school that were going to be little hotbeds of innovation, and then they would spread out those best practices throughout the school and in other schools. And of course, this is not exactly how it evolved to be. I would say most charters, well, and I didn't put it that way. One interesting thing just to know, on the accountability thing, one of the big things that the Department of Education has found troubling is that most states don't have enough money to do the oversight. That's why you don't see very many charters closing. You know, you look at those Credo stats and think, well, if they're not performing that well, how come more of them are closing? They don't have enough oversight. I mean, you have to understand, of course, if you're going to close a school, you have to come in and do the fair thing, but that takes time. And also, just to let you know, last night at the school board meeting, the board passed something called Creative Approach Schools, which means that a school can plan how they are going to help close the achievement gap, and it's with the teachers and the district staff, and if your particular proposal is approved, you don't have to follow any of the district's policies. You would not have to follow the math curriculum, you could have longer hours. So our district sort of has just created its own sort of mini charter thing. And it's a really interesting thing. The only weird thing is the board took themselves out of it, so they no longer have oversight of that school. But that is something our district just enacted last night.
Hi, I have a question. Can you review, you said it takes $10 to $50 million to run just the administrative costs of this. Can you talk about that a little bit more? I missed that in my notes. Where does that money come from?
You tell me. No, I mean, honestly, I've asked that question repeatedly, and we allegedly have no money. This is going to cost us $10 to $15 million, so we need, and this is the fiscal note attached to the bill. I don't know. 15, I'm sorry, 10 to 15.
Okay, that's where I go. But okay, so but still,
it's administrative cost.
$10 to $15 million.
Yes, because you have to have somebody. Again, the authorizers have to oversee the schools. The Washington New Commission has to have money. So
I guess my question then is to the charter school people: does that make sense right now? What's your thoughts on taking money that isn't available? You know, we're struggling in our public schools, and now we're going to add a $10 million fee on top to administer this?
Yeah, I would have an issue with that as well.
I think it's important to remember what the achievement gap is costing our state, though, and it's a lot more than $10 to $15 million. The Alliance for Excellent Education estimates that by 2020, more than $3.1 billion would be added to our state's economy if students of color graduated at the same rate as white students. So that's peanuts compared to 10 to 15 million. Yes, it will cost money to run a program. All of them do.
But on one hand, you're saying this is a very small little bill. It's only 10 schools. How is that going to close? How are those 10 schools going to close the achievement gap? And you're still funneling $10 to $15 million to run these 10 little schools.
You know, it's interesting because Governor Gregoire recently talked about education spending. And she said that in her time in office, and this is what she said, we've spent a lot of money on education, and we don't have very much to show for it. And so I think all our Pettigrew is asking is, we spend $10 to $15 million to try something that 41 other states are trying, that is endorsed by the current administration, that we could get millions of dollars in terms of either Race to the Top and or those standalone grants I talked about, if we did have them. And it could save us money by virtue of helping close the achievement gap. You're right, no one is saying 10 charter schools are going to close the achievement gap next year. That would be very misleading. But like I said, there has not been a state or a district that's made significant